What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, the man with the mustache, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, the man with the baby. Today, we're talking about Darius Slayton. He said that he's confident that he will get his contract situation resolved soon, feeling like it's going to happen sooner rather than later. As we all know, Darius Slayton did not show up to voluntary workouts. He held out, didn't feel like attending, as he's dealing with a contract dispute between him and the New York Giants. Now, Darius Slayton last offseason signed a 2-year deal, $6 million per season, $12 million in total. Great bargain value deal for the New York Giants, but for Darius Slayton, makes him rather underpaid. So now he's in a little bit of a situation here. What do the Giants want to do about it? Are they going to give Darius Slayton the contract that he probably deserves? Are they just going to give him a pay raise for this season? Extension? We're going to talk about that and decide what we think the New York Giants should do in today's episode. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And how are you feeling about Darius Slayton as he continues to progress through these negotiations while seeking a long-term extension?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. And listen, Darius Slayton's stock kind of took a hit with the Giants drafting Malik Neighbors. Now, I don't think his stock took a hit in relation to the wide receiver market. I think that he's going to get paid $12+ million per season. If Gabe Davis can get 13, Darius Slayton can get 12. That's kind of my perspective at this point in time. But now we ask ourselves, is Darius Slayton worth an extension at this point in time, especially because now you have Neighbors, your WR1, and you just drafted Jalin Hyatt last year to kind of serve a similar role to what Darius Slayton has been doing for the Giants. That deep ball threat, really just the guy that expands the defense, pushes them downfield. Slayton is a better player than Hyatt at this point in time, obviously has much more experience under his belt. And with a good quarterback play, I do think that he could be a 1,000-yard receiver for a team like the Chiefs or the team like the Bills. In fact, call me crazy, I actually wouldn't hate the Bills trading for Slayton. I think that the Bills might actually be a really good fit for him. Maybe that's something that the Giants could actually work out in terms of if they didn't want to pay Slayton and he wanted to hold out. Maybe they would give him to the Bills and stuff like that, and maybe that would be a good fit for him. But we ask ourselves now, do the Giants have the money to pay Darius Slayton, who would be our WR2? You have Wan'Dale Robinson. I think, you still got some of these primary guys, Hyatt, and then, now you have Malik Neighbors. Do we really need Slayton to be a long-term asset on this team at $12+ million per season? Well, next year we have $33.4 million in team cap space, minus about $10 million for the draft class, and then you want about $5 million to carry up into the season. You have about $17 million, $18 million available to spend. Now, if you take the out and Daniel Jones contract, you're talking about probably 35, pushing it maximum 45 million. You can restructure some more contracts, push it to about 55 if you wanted to. That means you're going really heavily into free agency, though. Obviously, Darren Waller is still on the books right now. That he accounts for $10.5 million that would be saved. I do think he still retires, so you can probably add that back onto the tally. I do think we have enough money to extend Darius Slayton if you wanted to go in that direction. But is there enough target share to justify it, right? Anthony, I'll ask you this. Do you think that Jalin Hyatt takes his snaps long-term? Do you think that that's why they drafted him in the first place, to be the deep threat, be the guy that they're focusing on? Or do you think that Slayton plays an entirely different role in this offense and can be the guy who WR2, Hyatt's your kind of extender, you develop him, see what happens as he grows, and then Malik Neighbors is your bona fide WR1, and then, of course, you have Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger at tight end and Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot. I don't necessarily think that Hyatt is close to being as good as Slayton right now. I think that he still has a long way to go. But this season should tell us everything we have to know about that situation. Slayton is probably going to be a Giant this upcoming season. Now, Joe Schoen did say, or rather Slayton said, they've been negotiating, him and his agents have been negotiating with Joe Schoen and the Giants about restructuring his contract. Question is, what does that look like? To me, I get more of the sense that Joe Schoen would rather build some more incentives into his deal this year than have him hold out for a new contract. Be like, we don't want to give you an extension, but how about we give you some incentives, and if you hit them, you can make a couple extra mil. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how I would see the Joe Schoen going about this, because I don't think he wants to extend him on let's say, add an extra 2 years to his deal at $24 million with $15 or $17 million guaranteed. That's a pretty penny for a guy who might end up being replaced by Jalin Hyatt long-term, who's making next to nothing as a former third-round pick. How do you see the development of Hyatt potentially eating into the reps and the target share of Darius Slayton, if at all?
Yeah, I think that the development of Hyatt is what the New York Giants are banking on right now. I think you said it best. The role long term probably belongs to Hyatt. That's what they're hoping for, though. Because as you said, Darius Slayton is a better wide receiver than Jalen Hyatt right now. Absolutely. But the potential is there for Hyatt to play a very similar role to Darius Slayton. If you think about what Darius Slayton was when the New York Giants drafted him back in 2019. Their idea for him was you're a perimeter wide receiver that could stretch the field vertically. It's just it just so happened that Slayton developed much more into a much more complete receiver than the Giants probably ever expected him to. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he seeked outside training. He didn't just develop through the training of the New York Giants and coaching of the New York Giants. One of the things that we know because we've spoken to his coach, Alex, is that Darius Slayton works tirelessly in the offseason with his wide receiver coach, Drew Lieberman. And that's allowed him to really expand his skill set, his route tree, and improve his catching and all of his abilities that make him such a good player. Is Jalen Hyatt going to do that for his career? Will he seek outside help? Will he develop in that fashion? We don't know that yet, and the New York Giants don't know that yet. And that's where, when you ask me, Darius Slayton or Jalen Hyatt long term, both. You want Jalen Hyatt around and you want to continue to develop him, but you don't want to take away a sure thing. Darius Slayton is as close to a sure thing in the NFL as you're ever going to get. The guy consistently puts up at least 700 yards pretty much every single season. He's done that all but one season in his career. He's been the Giants' leading receiver in 4 of his 5 seasons of his career. He's dependable. He's healthy. He's consistent. Like, this is the type of player that NFL teams wish they could have a million of. But unfortunately, you only have about 1 to 3 of those guys on your team pretty much every single year. Slayton just happens to be that guy that's been there for the team consistently, dependably, every single season. So I think it's tough for the Giants to say, okay, well, we do have Hyatt developing. Let's just have him take over long term. It's difficult to say that because you don't know if Hyatt's ever going to be as dependable as Darius Slayton. And that's where I kind of get into the mode where I'm thinking, I think you got to keep both of these guys long term and hope that one develops and, overtakes the other. And I'm not saying long term with Slayton like a 5-year deal. I'm talking like long term as in give him another 2 years on his contract, right? And then by the time that Jalen Hyatt's contract is expiring. Hopefully Slayton's is expiring at the same time. And depending on how much money you have, you decide who to give that payday to. I think that's ultimately the way I would like the Giants to structure this thing because I do like Jalen Hyatt a lot. And I really think he has potential. But his skill set is very unrefined right now. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to round out his game and make him a complete package at the wide receiver position. Right now, he's just not that. He's not a complete package. And I'm not saying necessarily that Darius Slayton is the most complete package, but he can run routes over the middle of the field. He could stretch you vertically. He can make plays after the catch. He does certain things that Jalen Hyatt currently cannot do. So to move on from Darius Slayton prematurely because you have Jalen Hyatt, in my opinion, would be a bad idea. But one of the things that makes me question Slayton's long-term standing with this team, in fact, actually give me confidence about it, is, yeah, the Giants did draft Malik Nabers to be their wide receiver 1, but they didn't draft any other wide receivers in the 2nd to 7th round. There were plenty of opportunities where the best wide receiver or the best player available on the draft board might have been a wide receiver, and the Giants could have double dipped at that position. Doing so would have given them a long-term answer for Slayton once his contract expires. Maybe they view Jalen Hyatt as that long-term answer, and they're planning on letting Slayton walk after next season and Hyatt takes over. Totally possible, but then you get behind Hyatt and the depth is pretty thin. Are you really depending on a guy like Isaiah Hodgins to take that step forward and become a dependable receiver for you? Very questionable. Bryce Ford-Wheaton, an undrafted rookie from last year who got injured, again, extremely questionable. So I think the long-term depth and dependability in this receiving core, it pretty much just rests on the shoulders of the core 3, which is Nabers, Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson. And again, you hope that Hyatt can develop into the player that Slayton is, but you don't know for sure. So I think it's tough for the Giants to say, here's our succession plan at wide receiver. It's just Jalen Hyatt. And guys, this is not me saying that I have no confidence in Jalen Hyatt. I think that he is very talented and he's in store for a great 2024 season if things go according to plan. But things don't always go according to plan. What if Slayton gets injured? What if Hyatt gets injured? What if Robinson gets injured? Injuries happen. Bad QB player, bad coaching happens. Things that can't be planned for happen. And ultimately, that's why I think that the New York Giants, if they want to entertain any trades for Darius Slayton, you better be getting a pretty damn good package in return because you have a pretty damn good player right now. Very dependable player. And it's tough to sell away a dependable, consistent wide receiver like that in hopes that your younger, less reliable player develops into something special. I think that it's smart for the Giants to hold on to both Hyatt and Slayton, continue to develop Hyatt. He can get his breakout season in year 3. That's possible. You don't have to rush him onto the field. Let him grow. And with Slayton, you know what you've got there. And again, it's very tough to find guys that dependable. So I do think, honestly, extending him an extra season or so should be a priority. For me, drafting Malik Nabers didn't change anything. You still need 3 to 4 to maybe even 5 starting caliber receivers in this NFL because of how pass happy of a league it is now. So having Malik Nabers as your number 1 and having Slayton as your number 2, Slayton's been your number 1 for the last 5 years. Having him as your number 2, it's going to become a luxury. You're going to have a really good second wide receiver on this team. And I think that's something that the Giants need to be excited about and not be too eager to move on from. Now, of course, we'll see how things play out this season. Maybe Slayton doesn't have the year that we all expect him to, and then, yeah, you probably talk about moving on from him. But everything that he's done throughout his career and to this point makes him one of the most undervalued wide receivers in the NFL based on his contract. And I think that drafting Malik Nabers didn't change that for me. I think that having those two play alongside each other should be the goal for the season. But Alex, maybe you share a different opinion. How do you kind of feel about that? Nabers, the drafting there, change anything for you with Slayton? And ultimately, do you think that this is Hyatt's job to lose, or is it still Darius Slayton's job as long as he's here?
I think that Hyatt has to prove it. You know what I mean? I think that Slayton has proved that he can be a good, dependable receiver. Obviously he's been relatively healthy, so like we need those type of guys, dependable players that show up every single week. He hasn't complained when the goings were tough. He has always been a really good teammate. So like I respect him for a lot of different reasons. He is a solid like mid WR2, and like those are very valuable in today's NFL. You look at kind of teams that excel with WR2s, and they take a lot of pressure off of your top guns. And right now I don't trust Hyatt to be that guy. I know, and that's kind of where Slayton's leverage is coming from for 2 different reasons. One, he knows that he is worth more to the Giants this year than maybe in previous ones because they want to see what Daniel Jones can do with the most weapons and best offensive line they've had in a long time. Hopefully, I'm not going to write it in stone, but hopefully. So I think he knows, well, this is the chance for them to see this, and I play a big part in that equation. Number 2 is he just watched Gabe Davis get $13 million per season. He just watched some very okay receivers get paid a lot more than him, and he took a pay cut to be with the Giants. He settled for less to stay with the Giants. So he probably feels like they owe it to him. And to be fair, I think that Joe Schoen probably will keep his word in the sense that I think he told him a couple years ago when Slayton originally took that 2-year, $12 million deal. Slayton, and then Slayton restructured it. He took less money. He definitely went to the favor of the team route. Now he's asking Joe Schoen, hey man, I was here. I helped keep this locker room together through the horrible moments. I produced when you called my number. I even shed my contract money. I took money away from myself and my family for this team. I just want that little bit of respect back. And I think that's why Joe Schoen is currently negotiating with his contract, a potential extension there. I wouldn't be surprised if it was more so in the range of 10 mil per season with incentives built into it. I wouldn't be surprised if they went more so in that route than being a 13 or 14 million per season guy. I don't think Joe Schoen can stomach it, but I could see 10 mil with an additional 3 mil in incentives built into the deal. So maybe a 2-year, $20 million extension with the upside of a $6 million more in incentives if he crosses certain thresholds. Probably a lot more reasonable thresholds than ones that we saw for guys like Paris Campbell who didn't even play. We're talking maybe crossing 700 yards, get $1 million bonus. So crossing 1,000 yards, get another $1 million bonus. Stuff like that. That's more attainable. I could see something in that realm being where they come to a conclusion. End of the day, $10 million, it's not going to kill you. You know what I mean? You get Malik Nabers. The Giants would have had to spend a stupendous amount of money next year on a free agent or acquiring a receiver via trade anyway if they went and got a Brandon Ayuk or a Deebo Samuel. They'd have had to pay him $30 million per season, $30 million per season. So getting Malik Nabers as your WR1, keeping that cost really low, and giving Slayton $10 million, you still walk away with a substantial amount more money. So I think that's probably the logic that Darius Slayton's agents will use. well, you would have had to pay a WR1 stupid money anyway. You got one in the draft, and now you have extra money to play with. And, we think we deserve a little bit since we've done a lot of favors, and we play a big part in this equation, especially if the offensive line can hold. His quality downfield will play a big part in that. Now, do I think that long-term Jalen Hyatt won't take his job, take more reps from him? Not necessarily. I do think that Hyatt is going to demand a higher target share as he gets better in this league and gets more experience, and the Giants' offensive line can, obviously operate at a little bit of a higher level, maybe hopefully a lot higher level. But with that being said, you can never have enough of good, talented receivers, right? Injuries happen. Having Neighbors, having Wandale, having Jalen Hyatt, having Darius Slayton, if you gave that wide receiver core to the Chiefs, they wouldn't lose a Super Bowl ever, let alone like they don't even now. If you gave that wide receiver core to the Bills, we'd be talking about Josh Allen winning a Super Bowl next year. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the reality. The Giants went from having one of the worst receiver rooms to a pretty solid group of players that I personally am sitting here saying could be one of the better units of the league if they continue to grow and develop, right? They do have that potential now with a guy like a 20-year-old Malik Neighbors who is a yak merchant, and also just super talented with tons of skills. So, with that being said, why take more weapons away from your offense? We should be keeping as many as possible and looking to draft a quarterback in the future anyway. And if we do draft a quarterback, the 10 million, 15, whatever, 10, $12 million you give to Slayton, we won't even be talking about it in a year or two anyway. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. But you never know. It really depends on how much he's asking. I don't know how much he's asking. If he's asking for something ludicrous, then I think you do have to be a little bit tough in that scenario.
Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind, though, Alex, and this is kind of something that we mention anytime we talk contracts, extensions, anything for the New York Giants, you got the Daniel Jones contract on the books right now. It's looming overhead. If they do move on from him next season, that's extra money that they have to spend potentially on a Darius Slayton, or someone else could potentially be Slayton's replacement. I think that's something to keep in mind as well. So with the New York Giants and Slayton, I think I've made my stance clear. I would like to see him extended. One aspect that we didn't even mention here, Alex, how about leadership? I mean, the guy is just perfect on the field, perfect on the sideline, perfect in the locker room. We're actually talking about it because last night he had these quotes. He had these quotes while being honored at a charity gala. So again, just kind of driving home the point that this guy is an exact type of quality character that you want wearing New York Giants blue. I think that there's a lot to be said about the Giants need high quality characters. They lost a few this offseason. Obviously, one of their biggest locker room leaders, Xavier McKinney, another one, Saquon Barkley. Both of those guys gone. Yes, they did a great job to bring in other talented players and leaders. I think that you could call Devin Singletary talented player and leader, and same thing for Tyler Nubin. But even still, in that receiving core, who's your mentor? Who is your veteran on offense right now? Saquon gone. Darren Waller, likely retired. Your veteran leader in that receiving core is Darius Slayton. Me personally, Alex, I don't want the Giants to just go ahead and potentially accept a trade offer that they get on Slayton prior to the regular season and really let the leadership of this receiving core be Wandale, who's only in his third season, Neighbors as a rookie. There aren't really any veterans on this offense to lead this team properly, at least in the skill position group. So I think that you need to keep a guy like Darius Slayton. He could be a mentor. He could give guys tips like we're talking about. Slayton does a lot of work behind the scenes outside of the normal regimen of what the New York Giants ask of him. Who's going to give these other guys those tips and connect them with these trainers and show them their routine? Slayton has to be that guy, and he will be that guy. He will be the one that tells Neighbors, like, hey, when we're not training here, you should train with this guy here, or you should make sure that you follow this regimen and practice and train the way that I do. And I think that's really important and valuable for the New York Giants to have a veteran leader like Slayton in the locker room who is such a high-quality character. Again, who took less money to be with this team, who puts in all the work possible in the offseason on his own, and who does charity work and all this other stuff. So I love Darius Slayton, what he brings to this team. Smart, tough, dependable. That's what Brian Daboll always preaches. That's what Darius Slayton ultimately is. He is smart, tough, and dependable. He is exactly what the New York Giants have been looking for the past 2 years, and they just happen to have him the whole time. They got to keep a guy like that around. And again, I'm not saying that they need to extend him on some massive deal, but to give him an extra year on that contract, I think is very wise for the Giants as you continue to build out this roster long term and have succession plans as well. Let's give Hyatt this upcoming season before we declare that he's going to succeed Darius Slayton. At least have Slayton under contract and on the books for the upcoming 2025 season. I think that's very, very important. So that pretty much wraps up my take on Darius Slayton and why I think the Giants should be looking to extend him rather than trading him. But Alex, do you have any closing thoughts? Do you think that there is an argument for looking to trade Darius Slayton? Do you think that's something that the Giants should not only entertain, but maybe be proactive about? Or are you kind of in the same boat as me where they should be proactive about retaining Slayton?
The only way that I see the Giants trading Darius Slayton is if he demands something that's just out of proportion. You know what I mean? Like, he'd have to be like, I want 15-16 million dollars per season, and Joe Schoen would have to be like, there's no freaking way, and he'd be like, well, that's what I want, and then they would probably trade him in that scenario. But for most, I think most of us would agree, Darius Slayton's not that type of guy. You know what I mean? He just wants what's fair value. He just wants what he feels that as though he deserves. And I think the Giants will give him pretty close to that. I think the Giants will say, well, this is how much we have. We have 10 million with incentives, or we have 11 million with incentives. And, I feel like this is pretty fair. You have the opportunity to earn that. And I think that we've done this for a lot of different players. We need the money. We have to keep going with building this roster up, and, we want to make sure we do right by you, and give you the ability to fight for even more. And I think that that's probably the direction they go in. They probably come to a compromise in that realm. But it would have to be something like, and it's just not Slayton's persona. Like, he's not the type of guy to be like, this is what you're giving me, or else I'm just not playing. He's going to take a fair deal. He's going to take a compromise that does pay him more, but gives him what he feels as though can make him happy. And I think that we both walk away happy with the situation. We have a guy that can be an effective WR2, and then obviously we have an effective WR1 in Malik Neighbors, and a lot of other playmakers on this team that we can look to build around long term. I know Slayton and DJ are close. I know they're buddies, but Slayton may be catching balls from another quarterback next year. Like, that's totally possible. And the truth is, if you're going to extend Slayton and you have a couple other contracts coming up in the near future, you're going to need that rookie quarterback contract to help offset a lot of these expenses, right? Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas, and obviously we cut corners letting McKinney go, and then going after Tyler Nubin, who we like, and then Deontay Banks coming up, and it looks like they're going to have an open competition at CB2 with Cordell Flott and Nick McLeod. Certainly not the ideal scenario, but that's what rebuilding teams do. Rebuilding teams do not have CB2s that you just don't know what it's going to look like there. You know what I mean? It's just not really the case. Great teams have CB1s and CB2s and good safeties. Right now we don't know what our CB2 position looks like, and we have a rookie safety we just don't know what's going to look like. So this team is obviously rebuilding the entire roster right now. They're going through step by step. They've done the defensive line. They've invested tons of capital in the offensive line. And now we're seeing the secondary, with Deontay Banks and Nubin getting that reset as well. It's time for some of these mid to late round picks to start carrying their weight and competing and, winning some of these starting jobs. But long term, the cap space is something that I obviously look at very closely. And I do think that if this team wants to be active in free agency next year, they're going to have to rid themselves of one contract. And, we talked about Daniel Jones yesterday, so I'm not going to go back into it. And, you can watch that episode to get the full kind of breakdown of the contract situation. But right now, I do feel Slayton probably has earned it. I think he's done right by the Giants, and the Giants will do right by him. And I think it'll be a fair compromise. It won't be anything ludicrous that we're like, what the hell are you talking about type of situation. I don't think they're going to trade him. If that were to happen, the Bills make a lot of sense to me as a team that, probably needs him. And Josh Allen would probably get him over 1,000 yards pretty easily next year.
Totally agree with you. I think that this is going to resolve in a fair compromise for both parties, and Darius Slayton will definitely be with the New York Giants in 2024. The only question is whether or not he'll be here in 2025. It's possible that they just add some incentives to him this year, or just raise his base salary, something of the sorts, and they just give him a little bit of a pay raise for this season alone. I think it would be ideal if they extend him through 2025 as well to give them some continuity in that receiving core going forward. I think that is ultimately the ideal scenario here, but we'll see how it plays out. It's going to depend on how much he's asking, like you said, Alex, and how much the Giants are willing to budge, how much they're willing to dish out long term. So it'll be very interesting to see, again, how all of this plays out, but you guys could stay tuned to the Darius Slayton contract holdout saga right here on Fireside Giants, where we give you all of your New York Giants news, rumor, information, and content daily right here on Fireside Giants. So Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.